Is it a tape that goes in there?
It is now recording. This is a continuation of video number 3, introduction of Jeanne Borgen, multiple psychic and clairvoyant. Good afternoon, Jeanne.
Good afternoon.
You would like to continue on with the...
with the first police case that I ever had. And this was a missing girl. I knew the family. And her name was Lisa. So as I continued, I saw Lisa get a car pulled up next to her. She was walking down to the plaza to that morning before she went on the boat. It was Saturday morning to cash her babysitting check. And this car pulled up, and in the car was a man and a woman. Now, I don't think Lisa would have approached the car if that woman hadn't been sitting there. So they asked her for instructions on something that was in the plaza, and she's pointing and telling them where to go. And then they said, well, are you going there? And she said, yes. And so she got into the car. And then when they drove by the plaza and kept going, she panicked. And because they didn't stop. They didn't even go into the shopping center. They just headed out. And they took her to this house. And at that particular time, I saw a very gruesome murder. But, and I went into shock. And I couldn't even talk. I mean, this was something that was horrible. And so, with doing that, I actually went in and spent a couple days in the hospital. I was in total shock. And then, but before that, I did that after I went out with John. We went to the police department together. We went to different places together. I went to the shopping center and whatever, and I was trying to work on it, and I kept blocking. I told John, I said, well, I know a lot of psychics, and why don't we go to some of the others, because I'm personally involved with this, and they can help us. Well, we went to about 4 different psychics. One of them had her in some wood camp or some sort, and I knew that wasn't true. She was with a bunch of girls. One person had her in a dormitory in Berkeley at the campus, and we went to the campus. We went to exactly where she said. She wasn't there. We went on all these wild goose chases, and that was finally when John said, okay, Jeanne, you've got to do it. And I said, I've never done this before, and I know her. And then that's when I went into shock when I saw her death. So after I got out of the hospital, I said to myself, I will never take another police case as long as I live. And I think God heard me and said, oh, yeah? Because that was the beginning of a long stretch of police cases. But we found Lisa, and we found a lot of other bodies there. And he was tried and convicted, and his wife got off totally for helping turn the evidence. She got off.
It was a plea bargain.
Yeah, and if she wasn't in that car, sometimes I get a little upset with the law. I know they do a good job, but I was a little upset. And I know that if she wouldn't have got in that car unless a woman was in that car. And probably the other girls they killed too. In fact, he ended up killing her best friend. And she got off. But she stayed with him till she was about to leave him, and then she turned him in. So he paid, and that was the first case. And I said, I'll never do another one, and never say never, because it's always going to happen. So, because I heard this woman came over, her and her husband, and her son was missing. And I thought, well, maybe he's just missing. So I went into trance. I saw him in his apartment, and what I do is I describe the whole apartment, where the windows were, the TV, the couch, chairs, everything, and they have to confirm it before I continue. And they confirmed it. He went down, and some boys picked him up. I described the car, and then they took him out into an area where they murdered him. I thought, oh God, here's another one. So I said, how do I handle this? Was the first thing I thought. And then I said to them, I said, listen, I can draw you a map, and I want you to take this to the police department and let them handle it, because I saw the mother standing over the body of her dead son, and I didn't want her to go through that. So she said, okay, we'll do that. And I drew this little map, and you draw it fast, and I drew the highway, and I put highway. The turn, I put a big block and said hospital. Then I ended up going up and making a windy road, and then I put a big rock there, and I put rock on it. I said, look there. Now, if I knew that that picture was going to end up in almost every paper in the world, because we got calls from everywhere in the world, I would have made it neater. I was describing it and just scratching it, the map. But it became very popular. It was on the cover too of, leading, like National Enquirers and Midnight and all of those. So anyway, the police got the map, and they went up, they brought in bloodhounds, and they looked the whole area over, and they didn't find her. So meanwhile, a reporter heard on the police radio they were looking for a body. So of course he headed toward what was called Hanley's Rock. And he said, what are you guys doing out here? And they said, well, some psychic says there's a body here. And then they finally just gave up. Now, they had dogs. They had people out there searching. The police department did everything they were supposed to do. And then they left. Well, the mother was convinced I was right. And so after her husband, several days later, got off work, they went out to Hanley's Rock. The husband immediately found the boy's wallet down by the rock. The police missed it. She was walking up the road, met a man, and she said, did you smell anything out here or whatever? And he said, yeah, there's some odor that's coming from right over in this area. And so she went there, and what they did is they dragged the body up the hill. And she's looking at the shoes of her son. So she climbed up there, and she stood over the body of her son as I saw it. And when I heard that, I was devastated, because I knew what she was going to find. So they called the police. No phone. They didn't have those little phones at that time. So she went down, called the police, and then the police came out, and then the reporter came out. He heard again on the police radio where they were dispatching a hearse. So he figured, we got a body. Mm-hmm. So the next morning, they worked that night. The next morning, he called me, and he was so persistent, I hung up on him, and then I was besieged, TV trucks, reporters, people pounding on my door, and I had to have police protection for over a week. It was awful. And my husband was on a fishing trip. So I was alone with 4 children, and the children were scared. Reporters they were just pounding on the door, running down the side of my house, pounding on the back door. It was terrible. So anyway, that was the beginning of my real career, I guess, in police work, because of all the publicity. And It went international. I got all these things, letters, stacks and stacks. They brought mail from the post office. Most of it was, can you give me this winning lottery number that's going to happen? And I just threw those all away. But I did get a woman that came from New York, and her whole neighborhood paid her way and her expenses. She knocks on my door, told me she was from New York, and she wanted to know the winning lotto number for New York. I guess they had a drawing. And I said, I don't do that. So I gave her dinner, took her to the airport. I thought, we've got to stop this kind of thing, because I'm not getting into gambling. Although my second home is Las Vegas, but I don't gamble. In fact, I was barred from the casinos. But the thing that happened is it went into an avalanche. Phone was ringing constantly. I had to hire somebody to come in. We had to have protection. It was a nightmare. And that was the start of it. Then it just gradually I got it under control and did a lot of different things. And I learned. Everything I did, I learned from, which was a good thing. So that was the start of the career. I've done police cases. I got called in for medically diagnosing. And the district attorney, I was turned in by a woman who didn't even have a reading. She heard somebody else's reading because I tape them. People cannot grasp everything in an hour. And if I put it on tape, they tell me that later on they'll hear something they didn't even hear that day. So I ended up really getting into my career and doing a lot of different things. I experimented with everything. But the medical diagnosis, that was funny because the district attorney, my husband was really scared. He thought they were going to arrest me. But the district attorney was talking to me, and I said, now, if I told you that you needed to get your wife to the doctor because she had cancer, would I be doing something wrong? And he said, no, does she have cancer? I said, no, she doesn't. This is just an illustration. Or if I see something that's wrong with you, and I can tell you that I'm not a doctor, and I'm not, but would you want to know? And the people from the medical profession were sitting there, and he said, yes, I would want to know. And he said, we got to work this out with the profession. He said, and they said, well, can she hand out a disclaimer? And I said, I can do that. And they said, well, will you send the disclaimer to us so we can check it to make sure it's proper? And then if you say something, you can't really diagnose if you'll say, will they have it checked on? I said, I can do that. So at that particular point, I had a spiel I had to make before I could predict anything that was medical. And I understood that. That was very logical. But it was just another thing that came up that was complicated. But, and I didn't have trouble with the district attorney. He became my friend. But you get into one thing after another with this. And it's the travel and all the things I did. I've been all over the world, almost every country. I've worked with the Russian psychics, and they are so, so good. They're exceptional, but they work it as a job 8 hours a day. Now, in our country, we are covered with so much superstition, and that sometimes it's hard. But those psychics were extremely good. And so, in fact, I tried to do some of the things that they did, and one thing I did, it took me a couple weeks to be able to do it. And they were coaching me and trying to help me and whatever, but I did it. And that was to move a glass clear across the table with my mind. They did it real easy. And then I thought I wasted all that time on a glass when I could have been doing something else, something better. But it just proved what you can do with the mind. And that was gratifying. But we, here in the United States, psychics do not get the same recognition. They did hire 10, well, they didn't hire it, it was a test. 10 psychics, top psychics, that they would pass something to us and have us work on it. But it leaked to the press or something, it got out, and they had to close the whole thing down. So I was notified it was closed down. They did not tell us who some of the other psychics were, but I was sure, because I talked to Jeanne Dixon, and I was sure she was on that council. And but they would give us a case, and then we had to work on it and then send it to them. They never gave us the answer. They just wanted to use what we could do, and we weren't trained like the Russian psychics were. I mean, they work in a laboratory. They do fantastic things. And I was resentful because of our superstitions and whatever here, we're not allowed to do the same thing. But I got over it real fast. I was really busy and it didn't, but for a while there I felt a little resentment. So, and still, I found I have never met a bad policeman, luckily. I mean, I know there has to be some. I meet dedicated people who really want to do something, and if it means calling in a psychic, if it'll do it, they'll do it. And they'll meet me on a Saturday on their day off, take me anywhere I want to go. I mean, and this is when it's their day off. They do this. They go above and beyond the call of duty. I got a little embarrassed, though. I did take them. I can smell a body miles, at least a mile away. So I was taking him down this road, and I smelled something, and I said, "Stop the car." And we hiked a half a mile in, and I found a dead deer. I was so disappointed, and the police thought it was fabulous. I found that deer, and I'm looking at him like, you gotta be kidding. I wasted all that time on a deer. But it has to be either in the early morning hours or in the late hours when it's still light, because the moisture comes out of the ground in the early morning, and it helps me. In the afternoon, I have trouble. So I had to find out what was good for me and how best to work. So I kept picking up little things along the way. So if I've got somebody missing, I generally go out early in the morning.
Basically, working with and developing your ability and tuning it in to be able to work with what it is that you're experiencing and seeing in order to make it stronger.
Yeah, but I did find out something that, I felt like the mind can do a lot of things, but I found that there is a time to be born, there's a time to die, and there's a time to be found. And sometime finding somebody may not be at the time they die. It's frustrating, but it's real. So I have to look at the case and say, well, this person isn't going to be found for 2 years. Police don't want to hear that. They want to act now, and I respect that. But, in one case, they came back to me, and they said, "Okay, Jeanne, it's been 2 years, go get it." We solved the case. We got the body. But it wasn't, I couldn't find, I knew I'd be blocked until the time that person was supposed to be found. So there's some type of, what would you call it? timing or some time that things are supposed to happen, and
vibratory rate for the when it should and should not happen.
It's weird, but and now I just don't even go until it's time. But that's hard to say to a police department. They don't want to hear that at all.
Not when you have an active investigation.
They have an active. They're so dedicated. They will go anywhere with you at any time. And I haven't had any problems with the police department. I did end up having one of them. I could tell he didn't believe in me at all. And he got him. We had 3 cars, and we were in the lead car, and he got in my car. And I turned around and I said, "What are you doing in my car? You don't believe in this." And he said, "This is my job, lady." Well, when I found the body, he went, "I believe God, I believe." And then it was the rest of the day, "Would you like some coffee, Jeannie? Anything I can do for you?"
Made him a believer.
I made him a believer, but I think he really wanted to believe, but he didn't know how it worked. But they were so good to me, and they've always been really good to me. It's and so dedicated, and I know that everybody isn't that way, but luckily I haven't really met them, so I'm happy about that. And the police department, this particular one, they had a thing on the wall, and they were throwing darts at it. It was a picture that they drew of a man's head, and they were throwing darts, and when I looked at it, I knew it was my husband, because my husband was blocking them, because they kept wanting me to come, and I couldn't. He kept blocking, and finally he gave in. But I started laughing, but I couldn't tell my husband that was him that were throwing darts. I thought they were taking their frustration out on that picture, because they knew he was blocking them. But it's something that in each case that I do, I generally say this is my last case, to be very honest, because I just feel really bad. And I think one of the worst, you go in and, sometimes you get a police department that doesn't really want to do things. In other words, we got some psychic thing, she knows what she's doing. But eventually, on every case I've ever been on, they turn, and so it becomes a good working relationship. But sometimes it's difficult because you meet a lot of opposition. In fact, in one case, I blackmailed the police. And I told them that I had evidence that I was going to go to the press with if they did not. They had some DNA, and I wanted them. We were fighting about whether were looking for a white man. I said, he's black. And they didn't believe me. So I said, send the DNA to one of these places and have it checked, because they can tell you what he is. And they wouldn't do it. So I said, if you don't get that out, I said, I'm going to the press. And they mailed it. But they waited to the last day to do it. But I thought, this is so, and it came back, he's black. So it changed their whole case. And now they were looking for a black man. So then I get into this situation too about, I feel everything with a person. I feel the good part of them, the sensitive part. I go through their childhood. I see what made them who they are today. And if I try telling the police about the good part, they say, he's a serial killer. He killed 18 women. What do you mean good? I said, yeah, but he loves his mother. And he's got a wife and a couple of kids. And he's sensitive. He goes to church every Sunday. there's a good part there. But you have to look at what made him become that serial killer.
Mm-hmm.
And what put him into that. And so that's what I do best. I can go from the time they're born, work them all the way through their life, and I see what happened. And I felt sorry for him. I told him there were a lot of hidden bodies on that case. I wanted them to talk to him and get him to confess. He did get the death penalty. But he was going to die in prison of a heart attack. I tried telling you, got to get the information now. Before they did that, he died of a heart attack. So we lost all those people.
Well, we'll have to wrap this video up and continue it on in the next one. The limit to the video is approximately 25 minutes, and I just got a notification on my screen saying you're reaching the end of your limit for your video. So thank you very much, Jeannie, for your insight and your knowledge, and we look forward to doing some training with you sometime in the future.
Oh, sounds great.
Thank you.